That's so true. It's oh my goodness, just the thought process behind all of it. It's once you get to understand it, it's like, oh, okay, that didn't make it any simpler. Like it's a little more difficult the more information that you know. And like I said, with the inclusion of technology right now, oh, it's just like all bets are off at this point. You're like, oh my goodness,
it's crazy. I contrast some of the way that the children are being raised now with the way my wife's parents brought her up. My wife was born in China and came here when she was 2 in 1946. And she eventually she started with an older sister, and also eventually they had a younger brother. And these were academic people. He went on to be a professor at the University of Rochester in chemical engineering. But these were people who were very careful about their children and who they played with and where they went to school and what was going on. And if you take a look in general at the different kinds of ethnic groups in the United States, you see that Asian families do very, very well in the United States.
Yeah,
and from there on down. So I think we have to get back to a greater concern about our children and what we're doing with them. There's a very nice book recently out by a man named, last name is Robertson. And it's 12 rules for life or something like this, 12 rules for life. And he has one of his sets of rules is raise your children in a way that would make you like them. Okay, raise children that you like, and this is a very good shorthand. You know, and some kids have to be treated a little tougher, some kids more gently, but essentially raise children that you like. Other people will like them. Okay, they will get through the world much better if they're the kind of kids and eventually people that get along with other people, that respect other people's rights, that are neither too pushy nor terribly reserved. So we are perhaps having the pendulum swing back from the idea that the parents don't have to do anything with these kids to a point where we invest a bit more in terms of time and effort. And that gets hard in a single parent family. It makes it a lot tougher, as I bet you know.
Yes, indeed. And you know, so we're live on Facebook. Hey, everybody over on Facebook. It's another episode of the Speak Easy podcast. I'm your host, Altavis Pelzer, the voice coach, professional speaker, certified life coach, Amazon bestselling author. But I titled today's interview, The Timeline of a Hero. And it's a couple reasons why. And I see you over there looking at me, Doug, because my guest today is Douglas Winslow Cooper, PhD. And when I looked at his bio, first of all, immediately I got nervous because I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many things that we could talk about, but I don't want to ramble and I don't want to take up his time. But when you think about the journey of a hero, and, you know, oftentimes we see them, they have their focus, they have the things that they're doing, they have the part that everybody sees, they have the part that people don't see. But in the end, you can see why they are the hero. You see why they've gotten to the point where they are. And even in the conversation that we've been having before we went live, it's like you see the passion in somebody. You see their purpose. It spills out whenever they're talking. You can see it even in just something as simple as somebody's smile. And that is something that I appreciate you. I applaud you. I thank you for your service and all that you have done throughout your years.
Well, you're awfully sweet. I'm in love again. So let's get to that story. The heroine story is the story of my half-century romance with a woman who's my wife. And I fell in love with Tina Sue, not S-U-E, but Tina Sue, S-U, Chinese last name. I fell in love with Tina Sue at Cornell, in Cornell Chinese class in 1963. And we went steady we went steady. Hey, there's a term from the past. We went steady through 1963 and all of 1964, and hand in hand, you could hardly pry us apart. And madly in love with Tina, and she was madly in love with me. As a matter of fact, the anniversary, we set Valentine's Day, it's coming up. Valentine's Day of 1963 is the first day of our being madly in love. Let's call it that. And that would be 55 years ago. We fell madly in love. So anyway, we go everywhere. We do everything. We are madly in love. And the only problem is she's Chinese American and I'm not. And as you might be able to tell. And my parents thought that was a risky proposition. And her parents thought, no, 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 no. No, no, no. Their precious Tina, and she was a doll. She is a doll. Their precious Tina is not going to marry some Caucasian guy. Is going to get themselves a nice Chinese professional. She goes to Harvard. She gets her master's there. She gets her MRS there, her Mrs. degree there, because she meets a tall Chinese man, a scientist, and he marries her, takes her off to the Midwest. I don't know how specific I want to get, the University of Chicago, I'll say, in any event. And after the incredible courtship, she gets home from the honeymoon, and it's time for her to scrub the floors. This is the time for her to get under his thumb. And for the next 17 years, she's more or less under his thumb. She works at the Encyclopedia Britannica on their editorial staff. She eventually has their first child, takes care of that at home, goes back to work for a few years, has the second child. And meanwhile, this man is working overnight at a school and sleeping during the day and telling her to keep the kids quiet. So you want to talk about difficult situations. This is an American girl with a Chinese flavor, married to a man who wants a Chinese wife. And when they eventually get divorced, he does marry a Chinese woman. And he then eventually goes on to have a Chinese marriage, but not an American marriage. So here we are. Here we are in 1983, my first marriage to a rich girl in central Pennsylvania, whose parents didn't think highly of me, unfortunately. That was 8 great years and a couple of bad months. I got a call at work. From a marriage counselor, and my first wife is there, and she's a bit upset. What's she upset about? Well, her relationship with her flying instructor has just come to an end, and she's upset about the breakup of that relationship. I said, what? I said, she has a relationship with a flying instructor. I says, she has got something more to worry about than this, because even though she's rich, and even though if I stay married to her, I'll be rich, I'm not going to put up with this. And it was a matter of a little while, and I brought the marriage to an end. So anyway, then I dated, and nobody made me feel the way Tina Sue had made me feel. So a couple of years after I'm separated and divorced from my wife, I called Tina up in Chicago, and I say, I don't know how to explain this exactly, but I've never forgotten you. And she says, nothing has changed for me in 20 years. Put her right in the middle of when we were madly in love. What can I say? She explained to me her situation. She had 2 children. Her marriage with her husband was on the rocks, but they had not divorced. She was looking into divorce, but she hadn't gotten divorced. And she had multiple sclerosis. And I looked up multiple sclerosis. And multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease. Your body is attacking your nervous system. And it comes in a wide variety of severities, okay? And when I eventually I got to meet her, as you might imagine, at that point she had minimal symptoms, okay? You wouldn't know she really had multiple sclerosis. Anyway, so I look it up and I read that, hey, a good fraction of these people end up crippled, bedridden, paraplegic, quadriplegic, on their backs in bed with tubes and breathing through ventilators. And I said, oh my Lord, I can't let her go through this without me. So the next day, I called her and I asked her to marry me. And she said yes. And it was the most, it was the most wonderful thing. We hadn't seen each other, Altabisa, in 17 years. I married her. I asked her to marry me without having seen her. And I said to myself, I said, we've got to be together. So I went out, I met her in Chicago. She was everything I dreamed of, okay? We talked about it, we worked things out. She had some sort of marriage counseling for a while with her husband, went absolutely nowhere. And as soon as she got divorced, we got married. And she brought her younger son with her. Phil at that time was 2 years old. And essentially I raised Phil effectively as his father. And we had 10 years without any problems. We had 10 years where she was paraplegic. She couldn't walk. And we had home health aides. And we've had 14 years. We've got round-the-clock nursing. She's on a ventilator. She's quadriplegic. And it is the central story of my life. And I consider myself to be an extremely lucky man.
Wow. And when we think about that hero story, it's funny because a lot of times the hero themselves don't see themselves as a hero, right? They see themselves as, I was just in love, or I just wanted somebody to be happy, or, I was just trying to fix a problem. And I look at everything that you've done throughout your years. Listen, guys, I know I didn't go over his bio, but listen, degrees from Penn State, from Harvard, from Cornell, environmental physicist, like it runs the gamut. There have been so many amazing accomplishments, but to see his face light up as he is telling this story just makes it like, you're like, he did what? Okay, the rest of that was nice. This right here, it makes me feel so amazing right now in a time where we have so many like horror stories with different people going through things when it comes to divorce, or just even with her story with, marrying somebody. That story in itself is one that doesn't always have a happy ending. It doesn't always turn out the way that her story was able to turn out. And so that's amazing in itself.
You have to imagine the courage that she had over the telephone to agree to marry me, not having seen me in 17 years.
Exactly.
They used to have an expression to buy a pig in a poke, which means to get something in a bag and you don't know what's in the bag.
Yes, so, indeed. Yes. It's kind of like,
yeah.
Well, we're just going to go and, try to see what happens with this and see where this goes.
Our wedding rings are inscribed, a dream come true.
Oh.
And that's exactly the way we feel. So that's the most important thing I've done in my life. I have a nice scientific career. I retired early at 8:58 in 2000, partly to help take care of Tina. And now I help people write their books. But I would say the most important thing that I've done is my marriage to Tina. And, the Bible says this has got to be crucial.
Definitely. I oh my goodness, that's amazing to think. Again, you go through so many different things in life. And then when you get to another point and you look back and you were able to say, well, those things weren't, that wasn't too hard. That was easy compared to, as an author and a speaker, when we're in the beginning stages, it's like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get myself out there? How am I going to make these connections? How is this going to flourish? And then when you've been doing it for a while and you look back, you say, oh, in the beginning, that was the easy stuff. Like, I'm sure you look at going to college and getting the degrees now, and you're like, yeah, that was a breeze. That was nothing. Yeah. I got plenty more where that comes from.
That's exactly right. Well, you took 8 years to write your book, and I believe you're probably a bit of a perfectionist. Okay, right? Yes. In 2011, Tina was there on her back, quadriplegic, ventilator, the whole business, and she said, "Are you going to write the book?" I said, "The book, okay," and the book. And I knew what she meant, because every time we told people about our love story, they'd say, "Oh, you ought to write a book." You ought to write a book. And we would say, "Oh, thank you. Maybe someday we will." So she says to me on her back, "Are you going to write the book?" And I said, "Do you want me to?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, I will." Well, in a few months, with a bit of help from other people, I wrote the book called Ting and I. Ting and I, a memoir of love, courage, and devotion. Her childhood name was Ting Ting. Ting. So that's where Ting comes from, right? And the King and I, of course, we've heard of that as a play. So I thought Ting and I, one of your favorites. So I thought Ting and I would catch people's attention. But the subtitle is important: a memoir of courage, love, courage, and devotion. And the messages are, in fact, the power of love, okay, the importance of marriage, and the value of life, even very handicapped life. You have to understand that when just before she became quadriplegic during a 100-day stay in the critical care unit of the local hospital after an MS attack. And when she got there, she had told them she was paraplegic. When she got there, she had this attack. She told them she didn't want heroic measures, sort of do not resuscitate. And I got there about 15, 20 minutes later, and I said, "You do everything you can to save her life. Her life is precious, and we'll sort this out later." I had her power of attorney. I said, "I've got a power of attorney. I want you to do whatever you can to save her life, and we'll sort this out later." They had her in therapeutic coma for a week or two. She couldn't talk for another week or two. She had things in her mouth. She was quadriplegic. We finally get to the point where we can actually converse. And I told them to do everything they could to save your life. And you're not going to be able to walk or use your arms. Okay. You're going to be quadriplegic. You're going to be on a ventilator, but you're going to be alive. Okay. And I hope I did the right thing. And she said, "Absolutely." She says, "I want to live for you, for my children, for myself." And so we have done 14 years. Well, there's courage, not only my courage in marrying her and taking care of her, but her courage in wanting to continue to live. And she has been an extraordinary patient. It's just an extraordinary patient. I'd be happy to send people should look for the book. For 99 cents, you can get the ebook version of Ting and I, a memoir of love, courage, and devotion. And I'll tell you, it's a story of love, courage, and devotion.
I can definitely imagine it. I am definitely getting my copy because I'm going to read it. Because everybody loves a love story. Everybody
Yes.
loves it.
Yeah.
So,
well, love is wonderful when you have it, and I like to say to people, I've been lucky enough to find somebody worthy of my devotion, because I am devoted to her, and she's worth every second of it. So it's a lovely story. So after that, I then wrote the book, and I sold a few hundred of it, gave away a few hundred of it. And I said, well, this has not become a bestseller. I'm not going to become a best-selling author, but I can tell people how to write. I can help people write their books. So then I helped a woman who might have been Ava Gardner's daughter write her books. I helped a detective who helped look into that question write his book. I helped two different friends write their books, telling their stories. And eventually I've been involved in a dozen books, either as a co-author or an editor. And it's great fun. It's
Oh my
great fun.
goodness. So in everything that you've been able to do in your timeline, what outside of Tina, what has been your happiest moment? Has it been the writing and editing that you're doing now? Has it been the environmental physicist piece? Has it been working with the Army piece? Like what piece has really been that that cherry on top?
Well, let's start with, we had Cornell, okay? Cornell was freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. That was not so much fun until Tina came along, junior year and senior year, okay? Then we have the Army, okay? Now, I'm what I might call semi-tough. I'd grown up in New York City. I'm not a really tough person, but not tough enough to be a Marine, let's say, or an airborne ranger, but tough enough to be in the Army. And so I was in the Army, and that wasn't too bad. I like to say it was 2 years of my life and 1 year of living. There was a lot of downtime, a lot of wasted time. The Penn State, and Penn State was actually of the three schools I went to. I liked Penn State the best. So Penn State, big lovely thing, and I fell in love with a woman who reminded me of Tina, for crying out loud. This girl, for a Caucasian girl, reminded me an awful lot of Tina, I must say. You might say I was on the rebound, but let's say she reminded me of Tina. How about that? Anyway, I did fall in love with her, I must say, and I was very, very happy to marry her. And we had 8 great years. We lived in downtown Boston for many of those years in a floor-through condominium while I was teaching at the Harvard School of Public Health, and that was nice. And except for the phone call about the flying instructor and a few bad weeks thereafter, it was a lovely marriage. Okay. So we're still getting to the best parts. Where are the best parts? The best parts are still Tina. And, the other thing that's lovely is my son. Formally he's our stepson, my stepson, her biological son. But I love him. I love him the second most of anybody I love in the world. So Tina's first and Phil is second. And the rest of the folk can come in after that. They can line up after that.
Yeah, everybody else can kind of just take a number.
But I liked working at IBM. I liked doing the scientific work that I did there. I liked solving puzzles. I liked the mathematics. I liked the people that I met. And I liked being a scientist. And I've enjoyed, in my retirement of 75 now, I've enjoyed doing this work where I help people through my Write Your Book with Me little company, hobby business. I enjoy getting to know these people, giving them a chance to publish a book for a year's work and a few $1,000, which is not a bad deal for them. And it's an interesting thing for me. So that's what I'm doing.
See, guys, do you see why I titled this The Timeline of a Hero? Can you see all the different pieces that equal up to me considering him a hero? Not just with him and Tina and everything else that he's been able to do, but even with what he's doing now with helping people write their book, I consider that hero status because a lot of people are interesting when it comes to telling their story.
Well, one of the most interesting stories right now that I'm working on is a woman from Canada. She lives in Regina, Saskatchewan, but she got there by starting out in Uganda. And this woman is one of Idi Amin's general's daughters. So this man was a general under Idi Amin in Uganda, if you're familiar with, and she was the second daughter of his second wife. And she has quite a story to tell. So I'm helping her. I'm editing the book that she wrote, and it's fascinating. So we meet some interesting people this way.
I think that's one of that's one of the reasons why I love the Speak Easy podcast is because the people that have come on, I've been able to meet some interesting people and listen to their stories. And everybody has a different story when it comes to why they write, what they write, and, how they've made that a business or if they've kept it a hobby. So with being able to see those different journeys and the different perspectives from people, it for me, because I'm a writer, I love it. Other people may not enjoy it as much, but that's their cup of tea. That's fine.
Right.
But I definitely enjoy it. And so one of the questions that I always ask is, as an author, now you have several books out. As an author, what has been a blunder or something that you kind of looked at as, oh my goodness, I should not have done that, when it's come to publishing your books?
Well, that's a very interesting point. There are a couple of things that were the first book after Tay and I was a book about a woman who thought she was Ava Gardner's daughter. And Ava Gardner did not have any acknowledged children, so she was supposedly child-free. There were some very strange coincidences between this woman's life and the life that you would expect of someone who was, in fact, Ava Gardner's unacknowledged daughter, okay? So we wrote the book, and we used the book. Eventually, we got the leverage to have her DNA tested against a relative of Ava Gardner in the North Carolina area. So I'm up here in New York State. And this is a neighbor of mine, essentially a neighbor of mine. And we had it tested. And if it's true that the person who spit into the vial in North Carolina was the nephew of Ava Gardner's daughter, then my neighbor is no relative at all of Ava Gardner. And since we agreed to go along with the test, we have gone along with the test. And so officially, my neighbor, who looks like Ava Gardner and who has a number of coincidences that would fit with Ava Gardner's daughter if she had one with a pregnancy at age 15. However, the DNA test with whoever it was who spit into that vial said that she is an Ava Gardner's daughter. So we're going by that. So was that a mistake? Well, maybe not. However, interestingly enough, I got a call from my co-author, Ava Gardner's not daughter. I got a call from her a few days ago, and she said, by the way, I found out from that DNA test that I have a half sister in California that I never knew about. Or as the old expression used to go, it's a wise man who knows his father. And that's another story in my life, which didn't make it into the memoir. Or we might say it's a wise woman who knows her relatives.
I would have to agree on that one.
Or as we used to say in high school, the first one can come anytime, all the rest take 9 months. Are we having fun yet?
Oh my goodness, I can only imagine. That's an interesting story. Oh, wow. And you wow. Like you kind of, because you want to know. You're like, okay, I really want to know, because if it's a yes, that it adds momentum and steam. And if it's a no, you're kind of like, well, we tried.
So being an author is fun. You enjoy being an author. I don't sweat these things. I can write good but not great prose very quickly, okay? I'm what I call, some people are perfectionists. I call myself a completionist, because you got to get it done. You got to get across the finish line, as you know full well, right? So one of the things I do emphasize, not with the people that I help, is getting the damn thing done.
Oh my goodness, that is so important. I think
Right?
we get so bogged down with wanting it to be the right color and the right length. My biggest pet peeve is always fighting with authors and telling them, stop counting the number of words that you're writing.
Yes. Well, fortunately, my Microsoft Word program counts them for me, and I must admit that it also tells how many pages. And I must admit that every now and again I'll change from single spaces between the lines to a space and a half between the lines and get myself a few more pages. Right? It's a little like popcorn. You start with this little thing, and then there are formatting things that you can do that makes it substantially larger.
Exactly.
We like to say easier to read, right? Rather than easier to write or inflated.
Exactly. So many times I'm just like, just write. How about we just start by just writing, just putting on paper, just typing it up. Now, apart as with the journey that you've been on, have you found it easier for you just to type as you're thinking out your process, or do you write it out first?
I type, and occasionally I'll even dictate. Now, it's true that I think we're talking a little bit about serious writing business here, right? Let's get serious here, Aldavis. Not that serious, dear. Just literary serious. What I like to tell them is write whatever you can, whenever you can, about whatever part of your life. Usually it's a memoir, whatever part of your life you want to write about, and we'll fix it later. And that's exactly what we do. And so, yeah, take it off the top of your head, write any parts you can. You can put it in different orders. And then, sure, I like to go over it. Look, I like to proofread it. I hate to see a mistake in the end. So it's not, and every now and again, no matter what you do, you're going to miss one. But my latest author, who wrote a very interesting book, a woman who's got brain damage, this book is called Whatever Happened to My White Picket Fence. And it's a woman who got her master's in education, who spent 25 years teaching kids who are learning disabled, who progressively over the last couple of years got more and more paranoid about germs. Now, you can't teach kids in elementary school and be paranoid about germs, because they don't come sterilized.
They are a germ. Sometimes they're walking.
As a mother, she had to finally quit. She was disabled. She was on disability. A couple of years later, they realized she needed a brain operation. They took out a tumor the size of an orange. The evening when the operation was done, she was completely finished with her fear of germs. Taking out the tumor had released whatever it was in her brain that made her scared of germs. That was the good news. The bad news is that it interfered with the elements in your brain that tell you, that filter you, essentially, filter things in both ways. So I would say her problem is she sort of lacks a filter. So she'll say things to you that she shouldn't, okay? And she'll be very sensitive to the things you say to her. So this, of course, has had an impact on her relationships. Would you accept that might have an impact on your relationships? And the poor dear has written a touching book, 400 pages, Whatever Happened to My White Picket Fence. And I'm here to plug it for people to go to Amazon.com. It is a very interesting story. It took 3 years, and every Friday at noon, I think we got together for 3 years. But she did a lovely job, and it's a touching book. And we meet in your business and my hobby business, we meet a lot of interesting people with stories. We think we got it tough. You think you got it tough, right? Until you get what my nurses either like or love Tina. She is such a doll. But I will say, when they go home, their problems look small compared to a woman who is quadriplegic, on a ventilator, fed and medicated through a gastric tube, and whose memory is slipping away from her. So this is, when you match it against that, your problems are small. My problems are small. Let's put it that way. And most other people's problems are small too. On the other hand, we're in America, for crying out loud. 21st century America. Look at you, look at me. We're making it. We're doing it.
Exactly.
There are
Exactly.
many other places and many other times where we would be in good shape. Okay? So.
Exactly. And I think that's, y'all know that I'm transparent. All of y'all that are watching, listen, hashtag real talk. Y'all understand that I'm transparent. I think that that's the piece that has made people sometimes a little lazy, because they're like, oh, well, I can just go do this. Oh, well, I can fall back and this will take care of me, or that'll take care of me. And it doesn't give them the same drive to achieve greatness, which we all can achieve.
Yep. You need to strengthen yourself by going against adversity. Right? It's almost like doing your push-ups, your chin-ups, your exercise, pushing against adversity strengthens you in a variety of ways, right?
Exactly.
As I'm sure you know.
Exactly. I've found that that's been the greatest way to move towards success. Like, there are things that, okay, I can fall back on this, or I can just go and get a regular job. But would they be able to handle all of this giggles and laugh? Would they be able to handle me being, as my clients call me, a cliff pusher? I don't think they would be able to handle all of that. Not without thinking that they would have to give me a drug test or something along the way.
The cool thing about you is that you and I are very similar. We have a tendency to laugh. There's a lovely quote a century or two ago. A man named Walpole said, the world is a tragedy to those who feel, and a comedy to those who think. Okay? And you and I, we're thinkers. We feel also, but primarily we look at the world and we see it and we know it's a little screwed up, and we can either be unhappy about that or we can find it kind of amusing. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Look how screwed up the world is.
Yeah. Yes. You can definitely look at a lot of it and go,
right? Look how screwed up the world is.
Did you really do that? Did you really do? I don't think you really did. I don't think you really did that.
Well, you're a charmer, kiddo.
Yes, indeed. So, oh my goodness, it has been an amazing time talking with you today. But before we go, I want you to let people know how they can reach out to you if they're interested in writing their story, and also where they can find you on social media.
Aren't you sweet? Okay. The best thing is write your book with me.com. Okay. If you go there, go to Write Your Book With Me, and you'll see the opportunity to contact me. If you contact me and you'd like a free electric e-reader copy of my book, I'll send it to you. If you want to work with me, I'll send you the paperback as well. I like to help people who want to tell their story. I don't do it for free, okay? But I don't charge a lot. I charge typically $100 a month. I meet with people an hour a week. I also do some editing and reviewing of their books. Free, people can take advantage of. You got to put, right? You got to put your effort into it. So you mix your effort and mine together, and you've got to put a bit of money. You've got to have skin in the game, as they say. But other than that, you have the opportunity. Typically, my authors get published within a year. Okay, it costs them a total of a few $1,000 for what they pay me and what they pay the Outskirts Press who publishes them, and it's not a bad way to leave a mark. To say what you want to say. So that's the big thing. And if you want to buy the book that I'm in love with, it's Ting and I. Can you love your book?
And I think that you've definitely left a mark on me with this interview, but also, even though I haven't met Tina, she's left a mark, because looking at her strength, looking at, you can feel it, just listening to the story, you can definitely feel the type of person that she was and that she is. And that says a lot. It speaks volumes. I know that I've had someone say to me, they met me in person at an event, and then I was a guest on their podcast later on. And they said, you know, the one thing that stood out to me about you was your smile. And it was funny because as I was telling my story and what I had been through, they said, no, that wasn't what I saw when I saw you in person. And I said, you know, I had to learn to smile again. I had to learn the power in my smile.
That it's wonderful that you have. Mm-hmm. One of the best compliments that was paid to me was somebody said, my stepson Phil, chefs are all Chinese, said my stepson Phil looked a bit like me. And I said, oh, that's nice. Thank you very much. Because he's a handsome boy. I said, thank you very much. And then they said, he has your smile. And that was a tremendous compliment.
Exactly. I love it.
You have a great smile. This has been a terrifically fun interview, and I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate you for coming on. So guys, thank you to all of those who have watched this or listened while we were recording or via the replay. I greatly appreciate you guys. Those who are commenting, will come back and we'll engage with you guys and talk to you guys. We'll also come back and put the links in the comments so that way you guys can get a copy of Tina and I. I am getting my copy the ASAP.
Atta girl.
Yes, I am getting my copy ASAP.
Now, is it true that the podcast will be on HBO?
Look, it's coming. Listen, cable, Comcast, call me up. Listen, somebody. Because these are the stories that need to be out there on television.
So. How about the Hallmark Channel, which is my wife's favorite channel?
Really?
Oh, the Hallmark Channel is great. We rotate between the Hallmark Channel and Home and Garden and the Food Channel.
Oh my goodness, the Hallmark Channel is one of my sisters. That's her favorite channel. Like when it comes to the holidays, anytime you come in her home, that's the only channel that's on. We're like, really?
Maybe you and I will be on the Hallmark Channel. Thank you.
I definitely appreciate it. And guys, if you are a speaker or an author and you would like to be a guest on the podcast, definitely make sure that you set up your time, bit.ly/speakeasy podcast. That's bit.ly/speakeasy podcast, all lowercase. And that way you can choose a time and date for you to be a guest on the Speakeasy podcast, where I am your host, Altavis Pelzer, the voice coach, not a voice coach, but the voice coach, professional speaker, certified life coach, and Amazon bestselling author. And until next time, guys, don't forget to press it out. See ya.
Consider yourself hugged.